Welcome back to the Day's Adventure Podcast. This is episode 3 of the Woven and Courage series. I'm your host, David Visser, and today we step into a world transformed by the Nazi occupation in the Netherlands. The Dutch people had fought bravely, but by May 15th, 1940, their country was under Nazi rule. The Netherlands, once neutral, was now a controlled state within Hitler's expanding empire. In this episode, we'll immerse ourselves in the first 2 years of the occupation, exploring how life changed under German control. What did the occupation mean for the Dutch government? How did new laws reshape daily life? We'll examine the changes in governance, the formation of police forces, employment, and the economy, religious institutions, and the propaganda efforts by the Nazis, and the start of the resistance. From the bustling streets of Amsterdam to the quiet resilience of the rural villages, we'll uncover the stark contrast in how the occupation unfolded. We'll also dive into the rise of key figures who gained power after the invasion, those who aligned with the Nazis, and those who were deemed enemies of the regime. Some Dutch citizens resisted immediately, while others saw the occupation as an opportunity for personal or political gain. The occupation wasn't just about military control, it was about psychological warfare, reshaping public perception, and forcing the Dutch people into difficult choices. Some embraced collaboration, while others quietly worked against the occupiers. Join me as we uncover the reality of life in the Netherlands during those first 2 years under German rule, an era of fear, adaptation, and the first embers of resilience. On May 15, 1940, the Netherlands faced a pivotal moment. After days of intense conflict, the nation capitulated to the German forces. The Dutch government, including Queen Wilhelmina, had already fled to London, establishing a government in exile. In their absence, General Henry Winkelmann, the commander-in-chief of the Dutch army, assumed control as the highest executive authority within the occupied territory. In a radio address that evening, General Winkelmann informed the Dutch populace of the surrender, marking the beginning of a new and uncertain chapter. The departure of the monarch and her ministers left a power vacuum, which the German occupiers swiftly moved to fill.
Nadat ons land met angstvallige nauwgezetheid al deze maanden een stipte neutraliteit had in acht genomen en terwijl het geen ander voornemen had dan deze houding streng en consequent vol te houden, is in de afgelopen nacht door de Duitse Wehrmacht zonder de minste waarschuwing een plotselinge aanval op ons gebied gedaan.
Initially, a military administration under General Alexander von Falkenhausen was established. However, this was soon replaced by a civil government led by Arthur Seyss-Inquart, appointed as the Rijkskommissar for the occupied Dutch territories. Seyss-Inquart, previously known for his role in the annexation of Austria, was tasked with integrating the Netherlands into the Third Reich. The new administration systematically removed Dutch officials from the positions of power, replacing them with individuals loyal to the Nazi ideology. High-ranking positions within the civil service, judiciary, and law enforcement were handed over to pro-German collaborators, many of whom were members of the National Socialist Movement in the Netherlands, or the NSB. This restructuring aimed to facilitate the seamless implementation of German policies and suppress any potential dissidents. In his first official communication to the Dutch people, Seyss-Inquart sought to present the occupation as a necessary measure for the establishment of a new order in Europe. He emphasized themes of unity and cooperation, urging the Dutch populace to accept the new reality and to work alongside the occupying forces. However, beneath this veneer of conciliation lay a regime intent on total Nazification of Dutch society. The swift and comprehensive overhaul of the Dutch government and the immediate communication from Seyss-Inquart signaled the beginning of a systematic effort to reshape the Netherlands according to Nazi principles. The occupiers aimed to integrate the nation into their vision of a unified fascist Europe, setting the stage for the profound and often devastating changes that would follow in the ensuing years. As the German occupation of the Netherlands took hold, sweeping changes began to reshape every aspect of life. One of the first and most devastating transformations was the implementation of the anti-Jewish and anti-immigration laws, which quickly escalated from restrictions to outright persecution. Initially, the occupation authorities introduced what seemed like minor inconveniences. Jews were banned from serving in the Air Force, a decision that barely made any headlines. But as the months passed, the policies became more aggressive. Jewish professionals were removed from their jobs, businesses were forced to register under Nazi oversight, and Jewish children were expelled from public schools. By mid-1941, Jewish citizens were required to carry identification cards marked with a large J, an unmistakable symbol of their forced separation from the rest of society. The systematic exclusion from public life tightened further, accumulating in forced relocations, deportations, and the looming specter of extermination. Meanwhile, within Dutch society itself, a battle of ideology was unfolding. The occupation brought with it a reorganization of power, and in this shifting landscape, the National Socialist movement in the Netherlands sought to claim a dominant role. The NSB, founded in 1931 by Anton Mozart, had long been a marginal fascist party, gaining only modest support in pre-war elections. Mozart, an engineer by trade, had been inspired by Mussolini's Italy and dreamed of a strong, centralized Dutch state, aligned with Nazi Germany. Before the invasion, the NSB had struggled for legitimacy, viewed with suspicion by many Dutch citizens. But now, with the Germans in control, Mozart saw an opportunity to rise. Under Mozart's leadership, NSB members were given preferential treatment, occupying key positions in law enforcement, government, and propaganda. The WA, the NSB's paramilitary wing, became a tool for oppression, working alongside the German police to enforce Nazi policies, intimidate citizens, and target Jews and resistant members. Dressed in black uniforms, the WA patrolled Dutch streets, eager to prove their loyalty to the Reich. My grandfather came across these members of the NSB while trying to hide himself and family members, as we will hear in his journals in the next few episodes. While some Dutch citizens willingly collaborated with the NSB, many viewed them as traitors, resenting their eagerness to serve the occupiers. The Dutch resistance, still in its infancy, saw the NSB as one of the greatest internal threats to national identity and freedom. Their presence created deep divisions, forcing ordinary citizens to choose sides, cooperate, resist, or try to survive in the ever-tightening grip of Nazi rule. But if the Nazis and the NSB controlled the political landscape, they also sought to control the flow of information. The first months of the occupation saw the systematic dismantling of the free press. Independent newspapers were either banned or forced to publish Nazi-approved content, turning them into mouthpieces of the occupiers. Censorship was immediate and absolute. Any publication that criticized the new regime was shut down. Yet, even as Nazi propaganda flooded the streets, underground newspapers emerged as lifelines of truth and defiance. One of the earliest and most influential was Het Parool. It translates to The Watchworld. Was founded in 1941 by journalist Frans Goodhart. Despite the ever-present risk of discovery and execution, Goodhart and his network distributed information from the BBC and other reliable sources, ensuring that the Dutch people knew what was truly happening in the war. Another key publication was Trouw. It translates as loyal or true, which emerged from the Protestant resistance movement. Its founders were deeply committed to upholding Dutch identity and faith against encroaching influences of fascism. Trouw's writers and couriers risked everything to distribute thousands of copies in secret, keeping alive the spirit of resistance. Underground newspapers operated through a vast network of hidden printing presses and fearless couriers, many of them teenagers and young women, who used bicycles to deliver banned publications. These papers carried news of the war, acts of resistance, and the realities of Nazi oppression, serving as a rallying cry for those who refused to accept German rule. In these early years of the occupation, the battle for information was just as critical as the battles on the streets. The underground press became a weapon of defiance, the NSB a symbol of betrayal, and the Dutch people found themselves navigating a world where truth and survival were often at odds. But the years ahead would bring even greater challenges. As Nazi policies tightened, resistance grew bolder, and the collaboration became more dangerous. What would follow was a war within a war, a fight for the soul of the Netherlands. As the Nazi occupation tightened its grip on the Netherlands, the regime initially sought to avoid direct confrontation with the nation's deeply rooted religious institutions, recognizing the profound influence of churches on Dutch society. The occupiers attempted to subtly co-opt these institutions, aiming to pacify and control the populace without inciting widespread dissent. In the early stages, the Nazis refrained from overt interference in church affairs, hoping to maintain a facade of respect for religious autonomy. However, as their policies became more oppressive, tensions with the churches escalated. The regime began to dismantle church-affiliated youth organizations, viewing them as potential breeding grounds for dissidents. Boys' clubs, which had long been a pillar of the community and faith-based education, were disbanded or absorbed into state-controlled entities. In some cases, the Nazis attempted to infiltrate these groups, using them as recruitment pools for their own youth organizations, aiming to indoctrinate young minds with National Socialist ideology. Despite these efforts, the churches increasingly became centers of resistance. The Protestant and Catholic churches, which had previously maintained a significant divide, found common ground in opposing the occupiers. In 1941, they jointly condemned the government's actions, forming bonds that denounced anti-Semitism in all its forms. This unity was a significant shift in Dutch religious landscapes, demonstrating the profound impact of the occupation on societal structures. However, within the Dutch Calvinist community, responses to the occupation varied significantly. This led to a deep internal conflict and shaped the broader resistance movement. Broadly, Calvinists fell into three categories. The first category, anti-fascist Calvinists, led by figures like Klaus Scheidler, This group vehemently opposed National Socialism. Scheidler, a prominent theologian, saw fascism as fundamentally opposed to Christianity and worked tirelessly to challenge the ideology behind the Dutch Nazi movement. His criticism contributed to the Synod of Amsterdam's 1936 rejection of National Socialism, and his activism led to his imprisonment during the occupation. Many within his faction worked behind the scenes to protect Jews, distribute underground newspapers, and support resistance efforts. The second category, pro-Nazi Calvinists, others like H.W. van der Vaart Smit, aligned themselves with Nazi ideology, believing that Hitler's rule was part of a divine plan for Europe. Van der Smit regularly defended Hitler, urging Dutch citizens to see the Führer as the necessary force against communism and moral decay. These pro-Nazi Calvinists were often rewarded with high-ranking positions within the state-sanctioned religious framework, using their pulpits to spread propaganda and encourage compliance among their congregations. The largest category, neutral or passive Calvinists. The third group remained passive, believing that Romans 13 commanded obedience to the governing authorities, even under Nazi rule. Initially, they cooperated with the occupation, seeing resistance as unchristian. However, as the war progressed and Nazi oppression became undeniable, many in this faction awoke to the realities of Nazi brutality and ultimately joined the resistance. The Nazi strategy of initially avoiding confrontation with the churches ultimately failed, as the moral and ethical imperative of many faith communities compelled them to resist. The dismantling of the church institutions and the persecution of religious leaders only strengthened the resolve of many Dutch clergy, turning them into vocal opponents of the occupation. While some Dutch religious leaders risked everything to resist, others actively collaborated, seeking power under the new order. Those who aligned with the Nazis secured high-ranking roles within the state's religious and political structures, reinforcing pro-Nazi propaganda and ensuring that sermons aligned with the regime's messaging. These church-aligned collaborators played a crucial role in persuading portions of the Dutch population to comply with the occupation, making them dangerous enablers of Nazi rule. The battle for Dutch faith was not only a fight for religious freedom, it was a fight for the soul of the nation. As Nazi policies tightened, the resistance within the church grew bolder, refusing to let faith be weaponized for tyranny. The ideological battle within Dutch churches mirrored the broader societal struggle: resist, collaborate, or stay silent. For many, silence was no longer an option. As we move forward, we step into another facet of life under occupation: the economy. On the surface, the early years of the Nazi rule in the Netherlands seemed to bring economic prosperity. Jobs became more plentiful, industries flourished under German contracts, and many Dutch citizens found new opportunities. But this prosperity was a facade, a carefully orchestrated illusion designed to win over the population and secure compliance. My grandfather, too young to work in Germany, was among those who benefited from these changes, at least on the surface. Enrolled in a welding certificate program in 1940, he completed his training in May of 1942, obtaining a valuable skill at a time when technical labor was in high demand. While opportunities in trades and industry expanded, they did so on the occupiers' terms, feeding directly into the German war machine. Meanwhile, my grandfather's oldest brother took a different path. In the fall of 1940, he left for Germany to work in one of its growing industrial centers. Based on journal entries, it seems he was employed in a food processing plant, part of the massive effort to sustain both the German economy and its war efforts. He was one of thousands of Dutchmen sent to work in Germany, whether voluntarily or under increasing pressure from authorities. We will look into the false economic growth and job creation under Nazi rule and how the occupiers used it as a powerful propaganda tool to manipulate public perception and enforce compliance. In the early years of the Nazi occupation, the Netherlands appeared to be on a path of economic revival. Factories buzzed with activity. Unemployment rates dropped, and many Dutch citizens found themselves in a position that had previously been out of reach. The occupiers were quick to highlight these developments, using them as evidence of the benefits brought by the German governance. Posters depicted industrious workers contributing to a thriving economy, and newspapers lauded the newfound prosperity under Nazi rule. However, this narrative was a carefully constructed illusion. The economy growth was not designed to benefit the Dutch populace, but to serve the German war machine. Dutch industries were repurposed to produce goods for Germany, and a significant portion of the workforce was either coerced or enticed into working in German factories. The apparent prosperity masked the reality of exploitation and the systematic stripping of the Netherlands' resources. The Nazis employed sophisticated propaganda techniques to maintain this facade. They controlled the press, ensuring that only positive stories about the occupation were published, and used visual media to create an image of unity and prosperity. This manipulation of information was designed to placate the Dutch population and discourage resistance. In reality, the economic policies imposed by the occupiers led to shortages, inflation, and a decline in living standards for many Dutch citizens. The initial appearance of prosperity gave way to hardship as the true cost of the occupation became evident. The propaganda that had once painted a picture of a thriving nation under benevolent rule was revealed to be nothing more than a thin veneer over a harsh and exploitive reality. As the Nazi grip tightened on the Netherlands, courageous individuals and groups emerged to resist the occupiers and protect those most vulnerable. One of the earliest resistant groups, known as De Guzen, or in English, the Beggars, was established on May 14, 1940, in Vlagardin. Comprising of former Dutch soldiers and other patriots, De Guzen engaged in acts of sabotage, circulated anti-Nazi leaflets, and gathered intelligence to aid Allied forces. Their efforts were instrumental in laying the groundwork for organized resistance, even as many members faced arrest and execution. In Amsterdam, a significant Jewish resistance emerged, with individuals like Henny Shift and sisters Fredde and Truus Overstegen playing pivotal roles. These young women undertook daring missions, including sabotage and assassinations of Nazi officials, demonstrating remarkable bravery in the face of grave danger. To counter the escalating persecution, underground networks formed to assist Jews and other targeted individuals in escaping the Netherlands. These clandestine groups provided false identification papers, safe houses, and routes to neutral territories. The Dutch Paris Line, for instance, was a notable escape network that facilitated the safe passage of many to Switzerland and in Spain. Such operations required meticulous planning and immense courage, as discovery by the Nazis often led to severe punishment or death. Despite the ever-present threat, the Dutch resistance persisted, driven by a profound sense of justice and humanity. Their collective efforts not only saved countless lives, but it also embodied the resilience and courage of a nation under siege. In our next episode, we will take a deeper look into the occupation, stepping into the world of my grandfather's journal. Through his own words, we'll relive the experiences of a young man navigating a world at war, witnessing the brutal changes firsthand, and making choices in a time where survival was uncertain. What did it mean to live under Nazi rule? How did it feel to watch your country change before your eyes? Join me as we turn the pages of history and stand in my grandfather's shoes during one of the darkest chapters of human history. We will read directly from his journal, his handwritten words, as he documents the transformation of his world under occupation. Before we close out this episode, I want to take a moment to say thank you. It is truly humbling to share this journey with you, exploring the incredible stories of resilience, survival, and courage in one of history's darkest times. Your support and encouragement mean so much, and I deeply appreciate that you've taken the time to listen, reflect, and honor these stories. I look forward to bringing you episode 4, where we step into my grandfather's world through his own words, seeing history unfold through his eyes. Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop chasing that next great adventure. That's it for this episode of The Day's Adventure. Remember, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop chasing the next great adventure. The world is full of wonders, and your next journey is just one episode away. To keep the adventure alive, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video versions and exclusive behind-the-scenes content. Want more? Hit subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll never miss the next thrilling episode. The world's waiting. See you next time on The Day's Adventure.